Hello, this is Chef John from foodwishes.com with chicken pot pie pasta. That's right, I'm making one of my all-time favorite comfort foods, which is a baked pasta casserole that tastes like one of my other favorite comfort foods, chicken pot pie. For a first attempt, this came out incredibly well. And no matter how relaxed and happy you already are, after you eat this, you're going to feel even better. And to get started, the first thing we'll do is pull the meat off a roasted chicken, which could be home roasted, or we can just grab a rotisserie chicken from the market. And we don't need to pull off all the meat. We are only going to pull off what I like to call the easy meat, which is basically those large chunks of breast meat, plus the easy to pull off meat around the thighs and legs. And sure, we could spend an extra 5 or 10 minutes getting every last little scrap, but we don't want to, because once we spend a couple minutes pulling off those nice big pieces, we will simply transfer that into the fridge until we need it. And then we'll take the bones and whatever meat is left in all those nooks and crannies, and we will transfer that into some nice cold fresh water. And besides a bay leaf, we don't need to add anything else. Oh, and a quick tip, before you add the bones to the water, it's probably a good idea to break that carcass apart a little bit. Okay, since I didn't do that, I had to use the tongs once it was in, which did eventually work. But it's also a really good way to get splashed in the face with cold chicken water, which, unless you're into that kind of thing, is not recommended. But anyway, once everything is submerged, we will bring that to a simmer on high heat, at which point we can reduce our heat to low, and then we'll simmer this gently for a couple hours, after which we will have a beautiful homemade chicken broth, which we'll use to form the base of our sauce. And yes, technically this is optional, and you could just use some broth from a carton, but this is so easy. We already have the bone, so why not? But anyway, our stock is done. Simply turn that off and let it cool before we strain it. And we can move on to what's going to basically be a chicken pot pie filling, which we'll start by melting an entire stick of butter over medium high heat in a pot, to which we will add our diced onion, as well as some cut up carrot and celery. And besides tossing in our salt, what we'll do is cook this stirring for about 5 minutes or so, until our onions start to soften and turn translucent. And once it looks like that started to happen, we can season this up with some freshly ground black pepper, a little bit of dry thyme, some garlic powder, and then last but not least, a few shakes of cayenne, just to help ward off the evil spirit. And once we stir that in and let it cook for another minute or so, we will transfer in some all purpose flour, and we'll go ahead and stir that in, and we'll cook what's basically a roux, ROUX, for I'd say about 3 or 4 minutes, or until that flour starts sticking and kind of toasting to the bottom of the pan. And it's totally fine if it gets a little bit golden brown, but we don't want it to get too dark, which can cause an off flavor if it goes too far. So we will keep an eye on that. And once we have cooked our root coated vegetables for a few minutes, we can go ahead and add in 6 cups of our reserve broth. And we will stir that in, making sure we're scraping off any of that goodness from the bottom of the pan. And what we'll do is raise our heat to high, since we want this to come up to a simmer. And while we wait, we're going to sneak in one secret ingredient, which is a nice heaping spoon of chicken bouillon paste. And that's just going to give us a little deeper flavor. Since we're not just eating this stuff straight, we're going to be using it to flavor an entire pound of pasta. So we do need this to be very flavorful and highly seasoned at this point. So we'll go ahead and stir that in and wait for this to start to simmer. And when it does, as with all roux based sauces, you will see this start to thicken up. And once this mixture does start to simmer, we can lower our heat to medium, and we can toss in some nice fresh English peas or some thawed frozen peas, which will work fine. And we will also toss in a small splash of cream. We'll give that one more stir before letting this cook on medium, stirring occasionally for about 10 minutes. So that's what I did. And about 10 minutes later, it looked like this. And no, it's not going to be very thick, which is good. Since again, we're going to bake this with a pound of pasta. And then to finish this off, we will chop up our reserved chicken into about a ½ inch to 1 inch size pieces. And we will stir that in. Cook this for another 5 minutes or so. At which point, besides giving it a taste for seasoning, our chicken pot pie mixture is pretty much ready to eat. You can just reserve that for a few minutes while we move on to cook our pasta, which as usual, we'll do in some very well salted boiling water for 1 minute less than the package direction. And I decided to go with a pound of shell shaped pasta for two very, very good reasons. First of all, the shape is going to be perfect to catch and hold on to all that sauce and bits of vegetable and pieces of chicken. But also, because chicken come from shells. Oh yeah, it's true. Look it up. But really, a pound of any kind of open-shaped pasta will do. So if you feel like using something else, go ahead. I mean, you are after all the Rega, how this should be done. And speaking of busting the move, while we wait for the pasta to cook, we can go ahead and mix up our buttered breadcrumbs. And all we need to do for that is add a little bit of salt to our breadcrumbs, along with lots of melted butter. And simply stir that together until we assume every single breadcrumb is coated with butter. And I do prefer to use the panko style crumb, since they're just larger and will bake up a little crunchier. And then once that's mixed, we'll just set it aside, go back and check our pasta. And like I said, we'll cook 1 minute less than the package direction. And then what we'll do is drain those very, very well, and then transfer it into our chicken pot pie mixture. Stir everything together until evenly combined. And I realize this looks very soupy now, but that's exactly how we want it. Because by the time this bakes, that pasta is going to absorb a lot of moisture, and we're eventually going to end up with what I think is the perfect texture. And that's it. Once mixed, you can transfer this into a nice large 4.5 quart casserole dish. And I'm going to use a ladle to do this so I don't splash it everywhere. Okay, in a restaurant, I would have just poured that in with reckless abandon, not caring too much about making them. But at home, unfortunately, I have to be a little more careful. But anyway, once we have almost everything transferred in, and we've used a spoon to distribute all the ingredients as evenly as we can, we'll go ahead and top that with our buttered breadcrumb. And once we do have those transferred on top, I think we should take the tip of the spoon and give the surface the old poka poka, just to push a little bit of that crumb into the surface. All right, for these kind of crumb toppings, I always think it's a good idea if the top's not too smooth. And that's it. This is now ready to transfer into the center of a 375-degree oven for about 45 to 60 minutes until our casserole is bubbling around the edge and our crumb topping is golden brown. And it looks like this. Oh, yeah, now that is gorgeous. And it looks like something we want to start eating right away. But I really would. I think we want to let this rest at least 10 minutes before we serve. And to kill time, we can snip some chives over the top. Or maybe scatter over some chicken-friendly herb like tarragon or Italian parsley or fresh thyme. And that's it. Once I had that garnish, and I very impatiently waited for about 10 minutes, I went ahead and served some up. And when I started this, I was hoping to end up with the texture of like a tuna casserole, or something that's very moist and not dry, but also not too soupy. And I'll have to chalk it up to beginner's luck, but this came out pretty much exactly how I wanted. So I grabbed a spoon and went in for the official taste. And that, my friends, was a rich, flavorful, tender pasta casserole that tasted pretty much exactly like chicken pot pie. And even though there was no pastry crust involved, our beautiful buttery breadcrumbs did a perfect job of substituting. So I really did think the flavor profile was spot on. And as great as I thought this came out, and as much as I loved it, I will tell you there's an alternative way to do this. Right? This is the comfort food version, where we're baking everything for a fairly long time. Okay, for a saucier, what I'll call fine dining version, we would do everything exactly the same, except we would cook our pasta all the way. And then instead of baking it for like 45 minutes to an hour,
Had a horrible experience. And here's her video that's in Facebook. Hello, I wanted to discuss here about VRI, video relay interpreting. It was about 12 years ago. My husband, he had a horrible fall. It was a near death experience. He damaged his lungs. He broke 12 limbs, 12 ribs, and his collarbone as well. You remember that. That day was really just awful for me too, with no interpreter. The VR machine kept on freezing during this dangerous and unpredictable moment. I didn't know what to expect. At that time, I was like trying to tell them into depth of what was going on, but I'm going to go ahead and keep this short. So we went to the DOG, Department of Justice, that was there at the hospital. And we finally got a letter in the mail. And I was reading this letter and I was just so disgusted by it. And the case was closed because the hospital followed the rule by providing VRI, Legally, that means nothing, that we can't sue them at all because legally it says so. And I was like, what? This can't be right. They're like playing with people's lives. So this can't be right. Th- they're trying to control communication access. And as deaf people, we know communication access, right? We know what we need and we know what we need to do. But we were stuck, so we couldn't go back with them and argue with them at the Department of Justice. We tried to force them to force the law, but we were just stuck, so we didn't know what to do. So we were talking with a man named Phil Willis. He's a really nice, very nice man. He's not a lawyer or anything, but he really knows, he's fully advocating for us and he really knows what he was doing. And he explained a lot of things that we didn't know that was really important. Like, for example, he told us you should have VRI for hearing people who do not speak English for in other foreign languages in a different country. And I was flabbergasted. That never did come to mind. The VRI is a machine. Foreign people can't really use that either. So it forced people to continue using VRI. It doesn't matter if it was successful, it doesn't matter if it was freezing. It's just a fact that people used it all over the world and they were getting stuck with these problems. And I said, why don't we go ahead and file and make it a good, and maybe you'll be successful. And so we went ahead and we filed it, but we kept on having problems. It just wasn't successful. So we just didn't know what to do. So we went to Washington, D.C. We got involved with the Congress, got involved with the legislator. And I didn't do it alone, but I was concerned for other people. And they were concerned because it's the law. The law says hospitals have to have the right to use VRI and they don't have to hire an interpreter. It doesn't matter if it's our right to decide if we would prefer, if you're lesbian, if you're bi, it doesn't matter. It's the taxpayer's right, but that doesn't matter. And I was just like, that's so unequal. Access at the hospitals is unequal. There's a list full of foreign things, and you have interpreters for this list full of things. And just for an interpreter for a deaf person who speaks in a different language, we can't use the machine. But, anyways, back to the point, using the machines for VRI, we can't do it alone. And you should also feel the same yourself. You should try to get involved in the future healthcare when you get sick, whatever happens. Are you going to continue using BRI? So that was my decision at that time. I'm not alone. So my case was closed. When my husband fell, he didn't get full access to communication. It was a dangerous situation. The social worker came, and she tried to advocate with them, gave him hugs and everything, and tried to support him. While my husband was over here screaming and huffing and puffing, and we couldn't do anything because of all the facial expression. He felt awkward and he just felt helpless. What are they saying? What are they doing? What is going on? And I just felt overwhelmed. That's the problem, and that is why. We need to do something as a VRI for the rest of our lives because of this one law. We can't do anything. We can't do that. That's not right. Thank you. Anyways, I'm not mad at you. I'm just fed up with how people are treating us. It's the law. The law says we can do it. The law says you can't have an interpreter or we can use VRI. VRI. I'm upset at the law, so I don't know if it's really going to be successful or not. But whoever put that into motion, I'm stuck and I'm fed up with it. And they're forcing us to use the VRI machines. I heard, maybe it's true or not, that in our homes in the ADA, it keeps on freezing and you can use your family's Wi-Fi at that time in their home. Meaning I noticed that there's a curtain behind them and they're in their homes using the Wi-Fi. If that's really true, then that sounds more like VRI at your home, and that's not the best thing. You decide and you think about it. Okay, thank you. Wow, I can't believe that the Department of Justice said that VRI is already a motion of law. Wait a minute. That does not make sense. Wow. Look at the world and the community complaining about VRI machines and the problems that they are experiencing with it freezing, with it just completely turning off at a moment. It's already having bad experiences with VRI machines. Wow. Wow. I'm just shocked. What's going on with the National Association for the Deaf? The NAD, National Association for the Deaf, they look out for the deaf people in the community in the world, and still we're having complaints and we're having problems and having trouble. VRI, some of its robots, all of its robots, and they're not human. Think twice of what life threatening things that could happen. Businesses, schools, interviews, whatever, that's on that. But medical should be requesting a live interpreter. It's more safer because it's our body and we're human, and it's safer to have someone to live forever and have someone have a live person. I want to say thank you to her, Cheryl. I want to say thank you to Cheryl for sharing this information with all of us and fighting for our rights. Understand, thinking, I was thinking, why not make a petition to remove VRI machines in the hospitals? It's not enough though. This is a real serious matter. We all need to go down. We don't need the robot. Are you human? Mm, okay. I will let you all know if we can make a petition to change and get removed VRI machines out of hospitals. So we'll see where that leads us. Thank you for watching, and I'll keep you updated.